The Chicago White Sox pulled off a huge trade. The return they got seems underwhelming. I'll discuss why next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, after watching a flurry of trades get completed over the weekend, not involving the White Sox, and I talked about how they were getting lapped by the Tampa Bay Rays, your Chicago White Sox finally pulled off a 3-team deal. I'll discuss in the first segment how it feels like a very underwhelming trade return, considering Erick Fedde had the highest F4 among pitchers on the trade market that was expected to be traded. Then, GM Chris Getz made two really poor comments regarding Garrett Crochet's demand for an extension from a potential trade partner, and I want to discuss that in the second segment. And finally, let's do a Throwback Tuesday, since I'll not be having a Wayback Wednesday segment, since I'll have Just Baseballs and Future Sox Elijah Evans on the show tomorrow to break down all the prospects the Sox have gotten in yesterday's trade and hopefully add some more before the trade deadline expires today. And the Sox just matched the franchise record for the longest overall losing streak in club history. And they're on their way toward at least setting a new low in losing for the franchise during a 162-game season. So let's look at the 1970 team that currently has the least amount of wins in a 162-game season and see how bad it was then compared to it is now. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Okay, so at a high level, the Sox get three prospects, all from the Los Angeles Dodgers, for three big league players in a three-team deal, where the St. Louis Cardinals get two of those three big leaguers, and St. Louis did not have to send a single prospect to the White Sox. In fact, the Sox have to send the Cardinals money. Three prospects, a player to be named later, or cash considerations is what the Sox got for Erick Fedde and Tommy Pham to go to the St. Louis Cardinals and Michael Kopech to go to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, the prospects the Sox are getting have high ceilings, and that's a good thing. And I'll get to that potential they have at a high level in a moment, as Elijah Evans from Future Sox and Just Baseball, he'll give you all the little details on those players tomorrow. But reading Chris Getz's comments after the trade and the rumors that the team did not want to trade within the division gives me poor process vibes, and gives me vibes that Getz is not going to be able to cut out to do this job. You know, I'm still willing to give him a fair shake, even though I hated how he got the job. But this is a pivotal moment in the Sox organization, and it just feels like they are not meeting the moment. Now, the good thing is the draft and trades like this, they need to play out over time. That is why I still have not made a hard and fast conclusion that Chris Getz is terrible at this job. I'm still willing to be slightly fair, although I will say I'm at the early portion of the Midwest goodbye when it comes to Getz. You know, I'm getting close to the door to grab my coat. I'm getting ready to say, well, looks like it's time for me to get out of here and, start that, goodbye, where then you turn out to have conversations for another 20, 25 minutes before you actually leave. I'm getting there. I also think this deal was made by an inexperienced GM. You want evidence? Frankie Montas. He's got a 5.01 ERA. He's making $14 million for the Cincinnati Reds this year, and he's got a $20 million option next year. He just went to the Brewers for Joey Wiemer, a former top 100 prospect, as I recall, and Jacob Junis, a pitcher who can help at the big league level. Erick Fedde has a WAR over 2, and he's making $7.5 million for this year and next year, and he nets the Sox 3 prospects. And he had to be packaged with 2 other players to get 3 prospects, and maybe another one. And I'm getting tired of these cash considerations. I'm getting tired of the Sox always getting cash considerations in these deals. That's just the sign of a poverty franchise. Always trying to get cash considerations. Jerry Reinsdorf needs to start coming up with other revenue lines other than, we got to trade some players and get some cash considerations. All right, so let's get into the players the Sox got. The Sox got infielders Miguel Vargas, Alexander Albertus, and Jarrell Perez. Vargas appears to be the centerpiece. He finished last year as the Dodgers' number 3 overall prospect, although he has now graduated from prospect status. He's hitting .239 with a .735 OPS in 71 at-bats. Struggled to hit at the big leagues last year and was actually demoted to AAA, but he has the potential to hit well this year at AAA when he had some at-bats there. .290 average with a 1.006 OPS with 8 home runs in 41 games. He had a slash line of 288, 407, 479 in 2023 at AAA, and 304, 404, and 511 slash line. So there is definitely a big-time bat potential that he has. It's just a matter of finding a way to take that production and get it to work at the big leagues. Hopefully he is the Sox version of Michael Busch. In fact, that is what Getz is hoping for, per Jared Willis from CHGO. This is what he had in his write-up. The hope on the south side is that Vargas can follow a similar trajectory. Quote, Michael Busch is a good comparison there, Getz said. Quote again, a guy who hasn't been able to get the runway because of the talent they had. We're going to be able to provide that runway for Vargas to see what he can do at the major league level. End quote. One of the keys to unlocking the 24-year-old Vargas's potential, Getz thinks, is giving him a chance to play every day. With the talent on the Dodgers roster, that wasn't always possible. But in Chicago, there will be little reason for Grifol not to write Vargas into his lineup on a daily basis. And the hope is, in the same way that he's benefited Busch on the north side, the Sox will see Vargas start realizing the potential that made him a top 25 prospect in baseball going into the 2023 season. And in terms of the scouting report from MLB Pipeline, Vargas is an extremely advanced hitter with elite bat-to-ball skills and a good understanding of his right-handed swing and what he's trying to do at the plate. He controls the strike zone, uses the entire field, handles fastballs and breaking balls with ease, though he did struggle a bit against changeups in 2022. He's more hitter than slugger, but his bat speed, strength, and penchant for making hard contact should allow him to get all his solid raw power and produce 20 to 25 homers per season. So you got to like that. Jarrell Perez was the Dodgers' number 17 prospect, and Alexander Albertus was the number 23 prospect, according to MLB Pipeline. They're both at low A ball. Both have now shot up the rankings in terms of the Sox system. Perez is now the number 13 prospect in the Sox system. Albertus is number 14. So that just shows you how much the Sox needed high ceiling bats and how much the Sox system lacked talent when it comes to their position players. And the nice thing is both are 19. Perez is hitting .264 with an 800 OPS in 75 games at low A. Here's a scouting report on him. He's been one of the best teenage hitters in the full season ball this year, which led to the White Sox to acquire him in a three-team trade in July that sent Fedde, Pham to the Cardinals and Kopech to the Dodgers. Perez has lightning fast hands that produce tremendous bat speed from the right side of the plate. He has an advanced approach, rarely chases pitches, or missing them in the zone, and produces exceptionally hard contact for his age. He also shows tremendous feel for pulling balls in the air without selling out for power and could produce 25 or more homers per season. Albertus is dealing with an injury. He did have a 342, 479, 459 slash line at the Complex League. He's hitting .229, though, with a 646 OPS in 19 games at low A. Here's the scouting report on him per MLB Pipeline. Even taking into consideration that Albertus has yet to face much in the way of advanced pitching, he has one of the most patient approaches in the system, drawing 70 walks versus just 40 strikeouts in his first 85 pro games. He improved the quality of his contact last year, hitting the ball harder and launching it in the air much more consistently. A right-handed hitter, he can get pull happy at times, but offers the upside of a high on-base percentage guy who provides 15 to 20 homers per season. So you got to like that. At least they zeroed in on guys that have pop in their bat and can get on base. Elijah Evans, he'll again give you more details on these three. James Fox, though, the managing editor of Future Sox, he's been a friend of the show. He tweeted this out at James Fox 917. Jarrell Perez and Alexander Albertus both control the strike zone, walk quite a bit, and project for 20-plus homer power. The types of high upside position players the #White Sox should be acquiring in markets like this. They are both far away, though. So the quality might be there, but you'd still like to get something from the Cardinals, especially since there were rumors that Jordan Walker was going to be traded for Fedde, basically straight up. You're talking about a 22-year-old outfield prospect with loads of potential. However, this is where I can see Getz getting roped into a rookie GM trade. Jeff Jones, who covers the Cardinals for the Bellevue News, tweeted out at JM Jones. Cardinals GM Mozeliak said the Cardinals and the White Sox weren't syncing up on a prospect package for Fedde, but he knew the Dodgers wanted Edman, and thought they could shuffle prospects that the three-way shuffle was agreed to early, but it took another day to work out the Pham portion. And I get the feeling that the Cardinals GM bailed Getz out in this deal because for Fedde to the Cardinals sounded straight up terrible. This is from at John Denton, John Denton, the Cardinals MLB.com beat reporter at John Denton 555. Some mechanics of the trade per John Mozeliak. He said this, the hashtag STL Cards and the hashtag White Sox agreed right away on Tommy Edman for Erick Fedde deal. However, the Cardinals wanted Tommy Pham and the hashtag Dodgers wanted Edman. Incorporating the third team and prospects took additional time. Tommy Edman is a utility player who I believe has not played this season, and he's only got 1 year of club control. Now, thankfully, he's going to the Dodgers, but it would have made no sense to add him to the White Sox other than to appease Jerry Reinsdorf and Shadow GM Tony La Russa with a try-hard guy. In terms of the grade of the trade, Bradford Doolittle of ESPN graded it as a D, said this: the White Sox needed young position players at every level, and they now have more than they did before. That's about the best you can say about a return that should have been ... more. And The Athletic, who no longer covers the White Sox on a daily basis, they were much kinder. They had two writers giving it a B and another C+. And again, I'm fine with the potential the Sox got. I just would have preferred maybe two more players, so maybe a little bit of volume too, especially coming from the Cardinals, even if they're scratch-off prospects. And that's why I get the feeling Getz is just not meeting the moment at a pivotal time in the franchise. So Chris Getz could save face today by trading ace pitcher Garrett Crochet for a package of prospects, but Getz made some comments about how Crochet's demands for a contract extension from any team acquiring him is going to limit his trade value. And I want to discuss how that was some very poor commentary Getz made, and also discuss after this trade, would you trust Getz to get a good return for Crochet today? And I want to discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trade, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive advantage by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM. That's SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox homestand continues with Game 2 of a 3-game set against the Kansas City Royals. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter, and thank you for making the show your first listen. Again, lots of great White Sox podcasts out there. Just always ask that you make me your first listen. I know the CHGO White Sox podcast, they had an emergency podcast. So did Sox Machine. I did have a short out there on YouTube. So for those that listen to me on on the podcast, you're wondering, like, why didn't you have an emergency pod? First, I love Erick Fedde. I love Tommy Pham, Michael Kopech. I wish him best on his future endeavors, but it wasn't a blockbuster names that reached the level where it's like, hey, we got to get, the editorial decision. You're like, we have to have a huge, 30-minute podcast. Let's react to it. None of that. What was crazy about it was the trade compensation was not finalized until like an hour or two later. There was talk of the Sox getting actually a for sure prospect in the deal. There were other names being thrown around. So I wanted to make sure I got it right. And I know Sox Machine and I know CHGO, they were on it live. They were making sure that they were getting the updates, and they did a great job on that as well. And that's why I just always ask, make me part of your rotation, and just I'm your first listen. So Chris Getz was clearly not happy with Garrett Crochet's camp leaking out that the ace pitcher's desire for wanting a contract extension from any team acquiring him to pitch in October, and also his desire to remain a starter through the rest of the season rather than maybe go to the bullpen for a contender. And there are times you appreciate a GM who's open and honest, gives the details on how things happening, etc. But then there are times like yesterday when Getz should have stuck to the GM language of being vague and basically giving a non-response to a question. Also Getz was asked about the Sox possibly working out an extension in the offseason with Crochet, and his response indicates that ain't happening, which is, I think, a huge mistake. And there's another example of how Getz had a chance to meet a moment and he failed badly to reach it. So here's what Getz said about Crochet basically destroying his trade value with those contract demands. This is from Scott Merkin, the Chicago White Sox MLB.com beat reporter at Scott Merkin. Part of the Getz answer on Crochet, quote, the communication had been very strong between Garrett and I and his agency, and I was a little surprised and taken back by how they went about it, considering I had a conversation with his agent the night before. That's not exactly the tactic I would have taken, even being a former player, quite honestly, just because the dialogue had been so honest and real and careful and mindful of his career because I've known him since we got him. We understand why a stance would be taken. Now, you go about expressing that is what was a bit hurtful, quite honestly, considering I feel like we could have handled it a little bit differently, and still I think everyone accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. But Garrett and I are fine. We are good. I'll continue to be one of his top supporters. In regard to how it affects the coming days, tough to tell, end quote. Now, first, before I get to the hurtful comments, 670 The Score's MLB reporter Bruce Levine did tweet out teams are still having discussions with the Sox about Crochet. So it's not like he is not being completely, taken off the trade market. But a bit hurtful? You think Garrett doesn't feel a bit hurt that not only does this franchise not want to pay him, but they want him to get him the heck up out of here? So I have no problem with Crochet making a business decision. Now, I'd be interested to see how he pulls it off if the Sox do trade him and say the acquiring team doesn't give him an extension. I mean, if he really does not want to pitch in October, that is going to be some cojones, my friend, to basically say, nope, shutting it down. I mean, could you imagine if he's traded to the Braves? That Braves fan base would go insane against him. The Orioles would just go crazy. But Getz is only feeling hurt because now he can't trade him. That's why he feels hurt. He clearly wanted to trade Crochet. With how many times USA Today's Bob Nightingale kept reporting this month about the Sox desire to move him. Like how earlier in this month that, when Getz was talking about guys that, he could potentially trade, he just volunteered Garrett Crochet's name. And again, I wonder where Bob Nightingale was getting all the information about the Sox potentially trying to trade Garrett Crochet. Wonder if it was Chris Getz. Now, I get from the long-term aspect side that Getz's motivation to trade Crochet was to add long-term pieces because the Sox farm system has just too many question marks when it comes to their bats. They got plenty of arms, not a lot of impactful bats. But at the same time, starting pitching can help you turn things around quickly, and a rotation of Crochet, Drew Thorpe, Jonathan Cannon, and potentially your top pitching prospects, Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith, that can help turn things around pretty darn quickly. Plus, extending Crochet sends the message to the fan base and the players that this team will not only draft you, develop you, but then they will pay you. That's not the White Sox way. In fact, Getz sort of danced around making a run at giving Crochet an extension in the offseason. Again, this is from Scott Merkin, at Scott Merkin. Getz on the chance Crochet signed long-term with CWS. Quote, there's a chance. He's still with us right now. He's a guy that is continuing to become one of the top arms in the game, and we certainly value it. But it also goes back to what is best for the long-term health of the White Sox, end quote. Okay, so the best interest of the long-term health is to sign Crochet through the rest of the decade. Get your owner to open up his checkbook and maybe add Anthony Santander in the offseason and maybe some other bats to cover for the positions that your system cannot develop a player at. Load up on bats at the top of the draft over the next, 2 drafts, especially at the top of the draft, and then piece together a bullpen with the young arm talent you have, and you can get to be competitive by, I hate to say it, White Sox fans, but 2027. Instead, the former director of player development, who did not develop much talent, is determined he has to trade Crochet to get those young impact bats because this team cannot develop hitting. They have to draft pitching at the top of the draft because it is a thing that they know they can develop. But all they have to do is turn around and trade. But all they're going to do is turn around and trade those players because ownership is scared to take the risk to pay them. That's why we've been in this endless circle of bats since 2020. With just a brief respite since 2012, with a brief respite that we have had in 2020 and 2021. And if you want to operate like a small market club, fine. But start acting like a small market club. Triple your analytics staff. Invest the limited resources correctly in developing both hitting and pitching, not just pitching. Make sure you make the correct free agent signings. Construct a roster that makes sense to your ballpark. Get an army of scouts to properly grade prep players. And then don't be afraid to draft them at the top. Get an army of scouts to grade players, even at college, and in other team systems for potential trades to make sure the eye test matches up to the numbers. Oh, and have a philosophy from rookie ball to the big league club of how this team should play baseball. And getting back to Getz's comments about being hurt, this reminds me of some Rick Hahn comments, like when he addressed those reports about the Sox toxic clubhouse. Sometimes you don't need to respond or find a better way. You could just say, look, we're going to do what's best for the Chicago White Sox. If we do end up trading Crochet, we would let him and his camp take it from there. But I would have preferred, keep it to you. Would I have preferred Garrett's camp not make that public, or just the team was not very motivated? That's what he could say. The team wasn't motivated to trade him unless they got a Godfather package. And then we just would have let his representation get involved to iron out some issues. And that we want to try to do right by Garrett Crochet, not, our feelings are hurt. It's always about the Sox feelings. The GM always brings that up. Past GMs, the owner, it's always about them. It's not about the fans. It's not about the players. It's about them. And really quick before I break, players that should be traded today, hopefully Paul DeYoung, John Brebbia, Tanner Banks, Chris Flexen, maybe Gavin Sheets. I know they're not going to get a great return, but you should move these guys. Try to get some scratch-off prospects. Former GM Jim Bowden, now with The Athletic, he even tweeted out he thinks Eloy Jimenez could get traded. And if Chris Getz could do that, I don't care if he gets like a player to be named later. That would make up for yesterday. I doubt Crochet and Andrew Vaughn get dealt, and it sounds like Luis Robert Jr. is not getting traded either today. Well, the Sox blew a lead last night and lost 8-5 to the Royals. They have now matched the franchise record for the longest overall losing streak at 15. And they're on their way to being just the worst team in franchise history. So let's visit the worst team in franchise history for a 162-game season, the 1970 White Sox, next on Locked On White Sox. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. Get in on daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 while watching Team USA. Rack up the gold medals this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, and more in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. My good buddy on the text chain loves PrizePicks because he can get his selections in while living behind the cheddar curtain. I think Prize Picks is great for how easy and fun it is to play. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox homestand continues as they play game 2 of a 3-game set with the Kansas City Royals. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Again, thank you for sticking with me. Shout out to all my everydayers. Love the community we have on the YouTube page. You should join us. Subscribe to the YouTube page at Locked On Sox. Also, next week, just again, programming note, I'm going to be on vacation. I had this planned before I came to an agreement to host Locked On White Sox. Going to take my wife and daughter to Disney World. So what I'm going to do is I want to explore fandom right now because it's been trying times. So I've set up Sean Anderson of CHGO, Matt Fletch of Last Comiskey, Missy Carroll of Southside Behavior and Sports Mockery, Ozzie Guillen Jr., and from the 108 guys to kind of just talk about the state of fandom from different sides. Like Sean's going to talk about maybe the current state and the future, since he's another show. He hosts another show like I do that talks about the White Sox every day. Matt Flesh is going to talk about the wonderful old Comiskey Park. Missy's going to talk about the social media world that the Sox has among the fans. It's a great fan base in terms of social media. Ozzie Guillen Jr. is going to talk about what it was like to grow up around the White Sox, and then from the 108 guys are going to talk about, kind of being at the ballpark every day, creating a fan movement, all that stuff. Now, normally when I do a Wayback Wednesday, or if I have to push it to today, a Throwback Tuesday, I like to focus on the glory days. Give you and I some happy times. However, this might be the lowest point of the season, especially if the Sox lose tonight, and that would set the franchise overall mark for consecutive games lost. Now, they set the single season losing streak yesterday when they lost 15 games in a row. And they reset that losing streak earlier this year when they lost 14 games in a row. And just remember, this franchise has been around since 1900. They've played 124 seasons of baseball, and they've never had 2 losing streaks over 14 games or more until now. And the longest overall losing streak was set at the end of the 1967 season, and then at the beginning of the 1968 season, which is 15. So your Chicago White Sox have now tied that mark. And if they lose tonight, they will have set a new franchise mark in futility. And they lost last night after, you guessed it, the bullpen blew a lead late in the game. 6 runs given up in the 8th inning. And if the Sox lose tonight, then I will say that this is the lowest point. Lower than when the team will officially break the 1962 Mets record for the least amount of wins in a 162-game era. Because there's still a possibility, somehow, some way, the Sox can find a way to win, 14 games to make sure they don't finish with 41, to make sure that they finish with 41 wins. Because the 62 Mets only won 40 games. But this team is projected to finish as the franchise's worst team ever. Again, team was founded in 1900. And I want to dive then in a bit more into the 1970 season when the Sox finished 56-106. That's the worst mark for a 162-game schedule. I think it was the 1934 White Sox. That's the worst team ever in terms of win percentage and the least amount of wins. But again, it was not a 162-game schedule. So the Sox drew just 495,000 fans, just a little bit over. The team scored 633 runs and gave up 822, a minus 189 run differential. The current Sox team has a minus 221. Louis Aparicio, Hall of Famer Louis Aparicio, led the team in average with a .313 average. Bill Melton slugged 33 homers. The team was 16-33 in one-run games, and they blew 40 leads all season. The current version of the White Sox have already blown 41, and we still haven't ended July, folks. They were 10-20 in July, whereas this year's club has won just 3 games this month. 3. They lost their 82nd game on August 21st. They had win number 27 on June 28th. The longest losing streak they had was 8, and they finished 42 games behind the Minnesota Twins in the AL West. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. But before I go again, thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And again, I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll have Elijah Evans on from Future Sox and JustBaseball.com to discuss the prospects the Sox got in yesterday's trade in more detail, and hopefully the prospects they get in some trades today. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding the Sox getting an underwhelming return in yesterday's huge trade. Gets his comments surrounding Garrett Crochet's trade market and the Throwback Tuesday's focus on the 1970 team. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.